Setting up your living trust is really just the first step. If you don't fund it properly, it's almost like you never created it all. It's like having a treasure chest, but leaving all the treasure outside of the chest. So I'm going to show you exactly how to transfer assets into your living trust the right way, and that'll help you protect your legacy. I'm estate planning attorney Mike Smith with Smith Barid LLC. We're a Georgia-based estate planning firm. We've helped hundreds of families protect millions over the last 30 years through proper trust funding. Now, stick around because I'm going to reveal the number one mistake that families make when transferring real estate to a trust. So let's talk about first, why does funding your trust matter? Well, an unfunded trust, like I said earlier, is like a treasure chest that you left all the treasure out of, right? And if you don't fund the trust, then when you pass away, your family's still going to need to probate your estate. So all the things that we were trying to avoid by setting up and properly funding a trust, they're not going to happen if you don't fund the trust. It's just really another piece of paper, and your family's still going to have to go through probate court. They're going to have to pay the legal fees to an attorney to probate it. They're going to be frustrated. So it's important that you build the vault, the living trust, and then you put the valuables, your assets, into the living trust. And I've talked about it in the past, but I think of a living trust as a bucket. And it's a bucket that you put your assets into, and as long as you're alive and you're competent, then you're holding the handle to the bucket. But if something happens and you can't manage things anymore, the person that you've chosen as your backup, what we call a successor trustee, just takes that handle from you, and they follow the instructions you've left them to take care of you if you're still alive, or to transfer the assets out of the trust, or whatever instructions you've left for them. If all of this is starting to make sense, I'd like, just do me a favor, hit the like button below. Let us know that you're getting some value from our videos. So second, let's talk about what assets should be transferred into the trust. So there are obvious things like you're going to want to transfer your real estate into the trust. And that could be either directly into the trust, or if you have, for example, rental properties, you may put those into an LLC and then transfer the LLC into the trust. Things like your brokerage accounts, you're going to want to definitely have in trust. Business assets. So if you own a business and it's within an LLC, you're going to want to transfer that into your trust. Your personal property. So in the law, we kind of separate property into two categories. We have real property, which just think of that as like your real estate, and personal property is kind of everything else. So in most individuals' cases, you own some stuff, right? And that personal property in your house, the things that you may have, like, think about it. You got furniture, you got lawnmowers, you got televisions, all that stuff, that's personal property. And you want to make sure you get that into your trust as well, so that the trust and the trustee will be able to deal with that after you pass away. And there's a relatively simple way to do it. You just got to make sure it's done, that you execute a document that transfers all that personal property into the trust. Now, I do want to mention one special type of asset, and that's retirement accounts. And I'm using the general term retirement accounts to apply to things like IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, all those sorts of retirement accounts. Those accounts are entitled to special treatment under tax law, and you get tax deferred growth in those accounts. And, if it's a Roth IRA, then, they're tax free. And those types of accounts, you can't transfer those into the trust. So what you want to make sure of with those types of accounts is that the beneficiaries align with whatever your trust plan is. And it could be that you have a beneficiary that can't handle money directly, or you may have a special needs beneficiary, or special circumstances like that would require some special planning and attention around how those retirement assets accounts are handled when you pass away. So that's kind of those types of assets and how those are transferred into the trust. And the specifics are, of course, going to be different based on, who the brokerage company is for your brokerage accounts, for example. But it's a process of, with the real estate, a deed is prepared to transfer the property into your trust. And by the way, a question I get often from folks is like, hey, what if I have a mortgage on my real estate? Can I still transfer it into the trust? And the answer to that question is yes. There's federal law which says that you can transfer assets for estate planning purposes into a trust, and it doesn't have any negative impacts on your relationship with your lender. With businesses, we prepare assignment documents to assign LLCs or corporations to the trust. It's relatively simple to do, but you got to make sure it's done and done right. With bank accounts and brokerage accounts, you're generally going to need to go to the custodian of those assets, the bank or the brokerage company, and they're going to have a form that needs to be filled out. And it's basically a transfer of ownership form, and it says, hey, this is who I am. This is who I want to transfer it to. That's going to be your trust. They have certain ways they want you to fill out those forms, but generally they're going to assist you with that. And then you sign that form and they transfer those accounts into the trust. So relatively simple to do, but those steps have to be taken care of after you've set up the trust. So when you sign the documents, your trust is established, you've got your bucket, you still have to put the assets into the trust. So there's one more step, like I said earlier, that you need to take once you have the trust set up. Now let's talk about real estate in a little more depth. So basically the process is that, when we're doing the estate plan, we prepare a deed for our clients. They execute the deed. It transfers the property into the trust, and then we record that at the courthouse. And then you need to let your homeowner's insurance company know that you've transferred your home into a trust. And they're going to need to list the trust as an additional what's called loss payee. So basically the person that would get paid if there's a loss of your home or damage to your home. So you want to make sure that insurance company has the information about your trust and your trust is listed as an additional loss payee. The other thing you want to check on is your title insurance. Title insurance that's a whole other topic, but it's something that most people purchase when they buy a home. Modern title insurance policies will cover the trust without any necessity to make any updates or give them information about the trust. But sometimes older policies don't have that kind of language drafted into the contract, so you may need to make sure that the title insurance is updated with the trust name as well. So now we've talked in general about bank and investment accounts. One other thing I want to say about that is they're generally going to require you to bring them a certification of trust. That is just a document that the estate planning attorney prepares that says, hey, this is my trust. It's a valid trust under state law. I'm acting as the trustee. Here's what the name of it is. And, sometimes a bank or investment company is going to require a full copy of the trust. In Georgia, we have state law that says unless that request is in good faith, there are damages available against the insurance company or the bank. There can be some privacy concerns around sharing those documents with them. That's just a thing you're going to have to navigate as you work with your bank or your investment company. Most of the time, nowadays they're happy to accept a certification of trust, so that's generally not too much of an issue. Now we talked about business interests. Just want to briefly touch on that again. We prepare assignment documents, and they're different depending on what the LLC operating agreement or the corporation bylaws say is the right way to make a transfer. But we prepare those for our clients, and it's pretty simple. There's some documents that you're going to sign and notify the record holder for the LLC or the corporation of the transfer. Sometimes you have to notify all of the owners. It just depends on what the specific language is, but we take a look at that and we prepare the right documents to get that transferred into the trust. Now, if you need any help with any of this stuff, there's a link in the description to our resources page, and we have a checklist there that will help you determine if there are any gaps in your estate planning and whether you need any help with that. Now, the critical mistake that people make when they create a living trust and they fund the assets into it is forgetting to update beneficiary designations or updating the trust. So first thing, when you make these transfers, there's some assets that you're not going to transfer into the trust. So for example, an IRA. If you've got an IRA, you're not going to transfer that into the trust. I went over that earlier, but you need to make sure that your beneficiary designations on the IRA are correct in what you want to happen. So I would encourage you, when you go through the process of creating a trust, to verify that all your beneficiary designations are aligned with the trust. And then the last piece is that when things happen in your life, so if you get married, if you get divorced, if you acquire a new property, if you have children, if you have grandchildren, you need to review your trust and make sure that everything still lines up exactly the way you want it to. So I recommend that you review and update your trust at least annually. At our firm, we have a program for clients to have that annual maintenance done on a continual basis. I think of a trust as kind of like an automobile in terms of maintenance. So, if you don't change the oil in your car, then you're probably going to have an issue with your car. Same thing with your trust. If you don't change the oil in your trust, if you will, could lead to problems for your family down the road. So make sure that as things change in your life, that your estate plan, your trust, and all your other documents are updated to reflect those changes. So let me just recap what we've covered. We've talked about why funding your trust matters and why it's so important, what assets you need to move into your trust, how to handle real estate, how to handle financial accounts, and why regular updates to your trust documents are super important, critical. Check out our next video where we're going to break down the biggest estate planning mistakes that high net worth families make.